Shalom. This is Truth is Everlasting, Lion's Den. I am Yahawashi. I camp out with Lion's Den, Hawan Ben Joshua in Jacksonville, Florida. But first I have to give a prayer to the Father, to the Son, to the elders, to the elders, to the Akims, and to the women and children. Kal Halayim La, Yahweh Bahashem Yahawashi. Bahashem Ha Rokah Kodash Mahamaf. In the name of Yahawashi, in spirit and holy and truth. Double honors to the 144,000 chosen elect. Double honors to the elders of GMS. Double honors to my elder Hawan. Salutations to the Akims who are on the four corners of the earth. And to the women and children, Shalom. This is going to be a hydration part 1. Okay? It's called To the Edomites. What are you going to do when Yahawashi comes for you? Right? Because more and more proof is coming out. Okay? More witnesses are coming out of the Edomites' own mouth. Right? I guess they forgot that as much as they want to keep insisting that AI is intelligent, it does not have the power, right, to stop all the information that's coming out. So it says here, OMG, you won't believe who's controlling this weather, hurricane, fire, and floods. Let's play this. It's going to be a real short lesson, okay? And then we move on. Here we go.
Of technologies, often referred to collectively as geoengineering, that potentially could help reverse the warming effects of global climate change. One that has gained my personal attention is stratospheric aerosol injection, or SAI, a method of seeding the stratosphere with particles that can help reflect the sun's heat in much the same way that volcanic eruptions do. An SAI program could limit global temperature increases, reducing some risks associated with higher temperatures and providing the world economy additional time to transition from fossil fuels. This process is also relatively inexpensive. The National Research Council estimates that a fully deployed SAI program would cost about $10 billion yearly. As promising as it may be, moving forward on SAI would also raise a number of challenges for our government and for the international community. On the technical side, greenhouse gas emission reductions would still have to accompany SAI to address other climate change effects, such as ocean.
Why is Amazon paying me
$63,000
a month? Well, I didn't make this kind of money.
Acidification, because SAI alone would not remove greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. On the geopolitical side, the technology's potential to alter weather patterns and benefit certain regions of the world at the expense of other regions could trigger sharp opposition by some nations.
Now, that's not some enthusiastic scientist talking about the pros and cons of weather modification through geoengineering. That's the director of the CIA, who all the way back in 2016 made this claim about how weather modification can be used as a weapon against some communities and nations. And if he's willing to let this much information out, I can't even imagine what kind of horrific things he isn't telling us. But luckily, he isn't the only one blowing the whistle on this whole situation. Just hear what this Air Force veteran has to say, who explains what kind of diabolical experiments are being conducted by our very own institutions.
Here with Kristen Megan, she's a military veteran, right?
Yes, I was in the U.S. Air Force for 9 years.
Wow. And you came out and blew the whistle on geoengineering, things that you witnessed were going on. Can you give us the real nutshell?
Absolutely. Basically, I had heard of what many people know as the term chemtrails. And I worked in a job called bioenvironmental engineering, and I thought that was insane. And why would we do something like that? Modify the weather by using hazardous materials in our atmosphere? So, and actually the process of trying to debunk it or disprove it, I realized it was actually coming right out of my office, as I was one of the people that was approving the chemicals. And it really shook the core of my oath. And I did a lot of sampling, a lot of investigation, and I blew the whistle and I got out. And I've now used my credentials, my oath, and my powers for good to help people understand it's very real. It's now openly admitted. There are multiple forms of weather modification. I specifically found the one of stratospheric aerosol injection. And collectively around the globe, we have to understand that it is now being admitted because they're saying it's combating climate change. Well, the climate change we need to be worried about is man-made climate engineering, also known as geoengineering.
And when you say you had chemicals being pumped into the air, what kind of chemicals are they putting out that rain down on humanity, basically?
Nanoparticulate metals, like you had different sulfates and barium and strontium.
And if you still have some doubts about the legitimacy of such claims from these very reputable and professional sources, well, you're in for a treat, my friend, because almost 9 years ago, famed physicist Michio Kaku had this to say about weather manipulation.
You know, they were talking about climate change yesterday, and now we're learning that scientists and researchers are looking at how to change the weather on purpose. That's right. Lasers now could one day manipulate rain and lightning. CBS This Morning contributor Michio Kaku is a physics professor at City College of New York. Professor, nice to see you. Extraordinary seeing Al Gore and Bill Clinton there together with Charlie, wasn't it?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, they did not get into this discussion,
No.
though. But it is fascinating. I mean, lasers, really, to change the weather?
That's right. Well, as Mark Twain once famously said, everyone complains about the weather, but no one ever does anything about it. Well, instead of doing a rain dance, we physicists are firing trillion-watt lasers into the sky to actually precipitate rain clouds and actually bring down lightning bolts. This is potentially a game changer.
But this is experimental.
It's experimental. However, in the laboratory so far it works. When you have water vapor and you have dust particles or ice crystals, you can precipitate rain. It condenses around the seeds. These seeds can also be created by laser beams. By firing trillion-watt lasers, you rip apart the electrons, creating what are called ions, and these ions act like seeds, like dust particles, bringing down rain and even lightning.
Go ahead.
Well, this fascinates me in part because, too, I remember reading the stories that China had used this during the Olympics, that the USSR had used this after Chernobyl to create rain clouds. I mean, did those really work then? We have some of these capabilities now?
Inconclusive. Even in the 60s, the CIA used this to bring down monsoons during the Vietnam War, to wash out the Viet Cong.
And that's the thing about the idea of weather manipulation. We've known about its existence for years, and yet our institutions, politicians, and media channels pretend as if it doesn't exist. But every now and then we get a sneak peek of what's really going on behind the shroud of secrecy. And this usually happens when some brave senators decide to ask questions.
The government has created weather tampering techniques so that the, quote, New World Order will be able to starve millions of Americans.
Worldwide.
Millions of Americans, and to control the rest.
Yes, sir, and that's my belief. As bizarre as that sounds, if somebody had told me that that equipment even existed 10 years ago, I would have thought they were nuts, sir. And at this point in time, we have all the documents to prove it. And if you think that 85 tornadoes takes place in the middle of our growing area by simultaneous accident, I'm sorry. With the equipment that's already set up internationally, and as bizarre as that is, it is proven and documented. We will supply you with those documents. As bizarre as that is, I would say that weather wars, and this is quoting actually Senator Claiborne Pell himself, that they are the greatest weapon ever created in the world, and that's the senator's own statement. So yes, I do stand on that.
And if someone still is naive enough to think that our own military isn't involved in weaponizing the weather, let me show you something completely mind-boggling. I'm going to read you some lines from an article available on the United States Naval Institute's website, and it was written all the way back in 1960.
Did you know China
you know how
is
it is with the
developing a
YouTube.
military
I don't control
AI
that,
that
okay?
could destroy the United States?
By Commander William J. Koch. And in this 64-year-old article, the commander states, recent advances in weather science demand the immediate establishment of a vigorous, comprehensive, and imaginative atmospheric research program under government sponsorship. The lowest price for procrastination in this regard will be political, economic, social, and military paralysis. The highest price will be absolute obedience to the leaders in the Kremlin. Under appropriate meteorological conditions, Western science scientists have caused rain and snow by seeding supercooled clouds with dry ice. Tremendous holes in these clouds and supercooled fogs have also been created. To be sure, cloud seeding and small-scale weather modifications are not the final answer to large-scale weather control. Weather and climate over all portions of the globe are the result of a sensitive balance of cosmic and terrestrial forces. But they are a great stride in the direction of large-scale weather control. And recent progress has been such that it is no longer visionary to discuss and plan for the eventuality of weather control. It will soon be a matter of survival when one considers that the capability of large-scale weather control automatically includes the possessor's national and international control to a very great extent over agricultural yields, water supply, health, electrical power, lines of communication, the course and intensity of storms and hurricanes, and military aspects of national defense. The political and other implications are truly terrifying. So basically, we knew how to modify weather decades ago, and we also knew even back then just how devastating large-scale weather control can be on a national and international scale, and yet today we think it's impossible. Well, if it's impossible, then how do you explain this?
A couple questions here about HAARP, the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program. This is located up in Alaska. It's currently funded by the Air Force Research Lab. It was formerly funded by the Office of Naval Research. One of the prime customers is DARPA, which is currently running experiments at the facilities. To start with you, Dr. Prabhakar, I understand that a lot of folks here on the committee probably don't understand what HAARP does. I think most Alaskans don't really know what HAARP does or why the agency is involved in it. So a very brief explanation.
One of our programs has been using the HAARP facility for the research that it's pursuing. And my understanding is that we did get value out of that interaction.
Dr. Walker, your agency is currently running the facility.
The Air Force has gotten great value out of HAARP in the past. We took it over from the Navy and managed it and actually did a number of experiment campaigns up there. Moving on to other ways of managing the ionosphere, which the HAARP was really designed to do, was to inject energy into the ionosphere, be able to actually control it. With DARPA completing their project, that's our last government customer that we have in the site.
It basically makes the ionosphere a laboratory, and we can do experiments that no one else can do. It's a laboratory without walls.
And HAARP is only one of the many projects funded by our military, which today has a budget of over $1 trillion. For reference, that is more than the GDP of 160 countries. And you think they don't have the capabilities or the resources to change weather? Well, if you hit the brakes and just stop for a second to ask why these strange events keep happening, you might just find some answers. But most of us are too busy to even ask. For instance, how many of you asked, why in the world is half of Wyoming burning right now? I bet you didn't hear a peep about it, did you? Well, according to local news, nearly 73,000 acres of the Bighorn National Forest are now on fire. Now, that may sound like just another forest fire, but you have to look deeper than that to see why this is an anomaly. In that same article, it is reported that the previous largest fire recorded in the forest's 100-year history topped out at around 18,000 acres and took weeks to grow that size. Over the weekend, the elk fire grew more than 25,000 acres in only a matter of hours, they said. So basically, we have a once-in-a-lifetime fire that's raging on in Wyoming and no one is talking about it. Well, luckily, this guy is not shy about asking questions, and he also has a rather interesting theory.
If you haven't heard, Wyoming's on fire. And what's interesting is the majority of it is on the eastern side of Wyoming. Now, just for reference, the yellow part of this map is federally owned land, and the white part is privately owned. These major fires are all in the privately owned sectors. Now, what does this mean? So a recent discovery claims that there is approximately 2.34 billion metric tons of rare earth minerals near Wheatland, Wyoming. Now, with this supply of rare earth minerals, we would be the leading holder in the entire world. Now, where is Wheatland? Right there in the southeast corner of Wyoming, where the worst of the fires are. Now, this won't be an overnight transition. Many proposals still face months, if not years, before work is final. But the citizens of Wyoming are poised to fight long and hard against these mines. Now, what started these wildfires? So a wet or an area with an abundance of fuels just so happened to get hit by lightning and ignited the fuel. And the state's notoriously strong winds are driving the flames, making it even worse. Sounds kind of like the perfect storm. So I don't know, people. You can put two and two together here. We have a location that could be the leading source of rare earth minerals in a certain part of Wyoming that a lot of people are against mining, and now they're being told to evacuate.
Well, the national park is federal land, but he's not wrong, because if this fire keeps on spreading, it will engulf farms and houses very soon. And we all know how much those mineral hunters love buying burnt out farms. Now, in other weather news, we continue to have hurricanes that are getting worse and more frightening.
Let me put this storm into perspective for some of you guys. First of all, this is a counterclockwise push, which that means if you're going south to evacuate, just don't do that, because the storm surge is going to come up. It's going to go south first and go north. So you do not want to evacuate south of this storm. Secondly, one second, I gotta catch my breath. All right, secondly, this might just genuinely be the worst combination of storms Tampa Bay could have had, because Helene was a storm surge storm. So basically that means that all of that water came up, which forced a lot of our residents to push out their stuff on the side of the road. I'm gonna show you the beach here in a minute. This is what all of Gulf Boulevard looks like, okay? This is all considered projectiles, because Milton is going to be a wind storm. So we have all the surge pushing everybody's stuff onto the side of the road, and now we have this storm, which is going to very much likely push this stuff around.
Well, maybe Bill Gates can save us, since he has the so-called hurricane prevention technology.
When you hear the name Bill Gates, you probably think Microsoft founder, but now the billionaire may be known as the hurricane tamer. Gates is listed as one of 13 inventors on a patent filed for hurricane prevention methods. Hurricanes gain strength from condensation driven by warm surface water, which leads to greater wind speeds. Gates and his...
Okay, let's stop right there so I can make it short. So as you can see, more proof is coming out. I want to go to 2 Esdras chapter 16, verse 1. Woe be unto thee, Babylon. So-called America is the second spiritual Babylon, by the way, okay? And it says also, and Assyria, but we're not going to worry about that. It says also, woe be unto thee, Egypt and Syria. We're going to concentrate on Egypt, because also so-called America is the second spiritual Egypt, right? Now we're going to go to verse 2, and we're going to leave it with this. Gird up yourselves with cloths of stack and hair. Bewail your children, and be sorry, for your destruction is at hand. Yes, Yahawashi is giving the Edomites the warning. As you can see, many Edomite, middle class, and poor are losing loved ones, right? By the hands of their own people that are in power. I hope that this was edifying. Okay, it was a short lesson because it had a lot of information. And with that, I'll say Shalom.